All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are tackling a massive question, one that millions of us have asked. How in the world do we really learn a new language? Is it all about boring grammar drills, or do you have to move to another country? Let's dive in and piece this puzzle together.
You know that feeling, right? One day you're on a roll, ordering coffee like a local, and it feels amazing. But the very next day, you can't even remember how to say hello. It's this wild ride of incredible highs and super frustrating lows. So, what's actually going on inside our brains?
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics of the puzzle, then map out the typical learner's journey. After that, we'll uncover a secret ingredient called input, see why interaction is so critical, and finally, look at the human side of things and how to find your own learning superpower.
Okay, first things first. To really get how we learn, we have to start with a super important distinction: the difference between what a teacher is doing up at the front of the room and what's actually happening inside a learner's head.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. Teaching and learning are not two sides of the same coin. A teacher can give the most amazing lesson in the world, but that doesn't automatically mean learning is happening. Real, lasting change happens inside the learner's mind, and that's why we're focusing on language acquisition. And believe it or not, there's a whole field of study dedicated to this. It's called second language acquisition, or SLA for short. And it's the science of how we learn any language after our first one. Doesn't matter if it's your second language or your fifth. It's this cool mix of linguistics, psychology, and education.
So, is there some kind of map for this whole learning journey? You might think everyone's path is completely different, but researchers have found that, surprisingly, a lot of us go through a pretty predictable set of stages.
But before we look at those stages, we need to get this one major distinction down. A researcher named Stephen Krashen pointed out the huge difference between acquisition and learning. Acquisition is that natural subconscious way we pick up a language, like a kid does. Learning, on the other hand, is that conscious, classroom-style studying of grammar rules. And most experts now agree, real fluency comes from acquisition.
So, across tons of learners, we see these three stages pop up again and again. It often kicks off with a silent period, where you're basically just a sponge, listening and absorbing everything. That's followed by formulaic speech, and then finally simplification, where you start building your own basic sentences. Let's zoom in on that second stage for a sec. This is where you're using these memorized chunks to get by. Think about it. Phrases like, I don't know, or patterns like, can I have a, and you just fill in the blank. It's a really smart shortcut our brains use to start communicating way before we figured out all the grammar. Okay, this brings us to one of the biggest, most influential ideas in the entire history of language learning. If the goal is that natural acquisition, then how do we get there? Well, one massive theory suggests it all comes down to one single thing: input. Stephen Krashen's model was a total game changer. He had a whole set of ideas, but two of them really shook things up. The input hypothesis, which is all about what we listen to and read, and the affective filter hypothesis, which is all about how we feel when we're learning. The core idea here is that, according to Krashen, we only acquire language in one way: by understanding messages. He called this comprehensible input, or I+1. Think of it like this. I is your current level, and +1 is stuff that's just a tiny bit beyond what you know. It's like the perfect level in a video game. It's challenging, but not so hard that you just quit. But there's a catch. Even if you get the perfect input, it might not do any good if your affective filter is up. This is basically an emotional wall. When you're stressed, anxious, or just not motivated, that filter goes way up, and the input just bounces right off. But when you're relaxed, curious, and feeling good, the filter's low, and that language can flow right in. Now, Krashen's theory was revolutionary, no doubt, but it kind of painted this picture of a learner who just sits there soaking up language. But what about actually, using it? This question led to a whole new wave of theories all about interaction. So the interaction hypothesis doesn't throw Krashen's ideas out, it builds right on top of them. It says that conversation is the magic key that makes input understandable. Think about it. When you're talking to someone and you get confused, you can ask them to explain. They can repeat things or say it in a simpler way. It's that back and forth dance that makes the learning happen. This led to another big idea called the output hypothesis.
A researcher named Meryl Swain argued that we don't just learn from listening, we also learn when we're pushed to actually speak or write. When you try to explain something complicated, you're forced to notice what you don't know, and you have to figure out the right way to say it. Okay, so we've talked about input and output, but learning a language isn't just some technical exercise, right? It involves our entire selves, our feelings, our identity, and how we connect with the world and the people around us. This quote from Carl Rogers just nails the humanist view perfectly. We learn things so much better when they actually matter to us personally. Our emotions and feelings aren't some annoying distraction from learning, they're right at the heart of it. And John Schumann's acculturation theory really drives this home. He said that how successful we are is directly tied to our distance from the culture of the language we're learning. That includes social distance, like how much you feel a part of the community, and psychological distance, how you're feeling on the inside, dealing with stuff like culture shock or just staying motivated. And that brings us to the final, and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. If our personality and our feelings matter so much, what about our own unique talents and styles of thinking? Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences is all about this idea that we're all smart, just in different ways. Maybe you have a strong musical intelligence and you can nail pronunciation by listening to songs. Or maybe you're a kinesthetic learner and you learn verbs best by actually acting them out. The point is to find your strengths and use them as your learning superpower. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? Well, it's that there is no single magic bullet. There's no one secret trick. Real successful language acquisition is a powerful mix of everything we've talked about, getting lots of understandable input, having real conversations, and honoring all those personal things that make you you, your motivation, your feelings, and your own unique style. And that leaves us with one final thought. When you look back at your own experiences learning a language, which of these ideas really hits home? Was it all about the input for you? Was it the interaction? Or was it that personal connection to the culture? Figuring out your own learning puzzle is the very first step to solving the next one. Thanks for joining me.